Hello, welcome to this first video on measurement and conversion. In these videos, we will learn to measure different things. We will learn how to convert one unit into another unit. Now, what is a unit is something that we will learn later in our lectures. Now, in science, in mathematics, and in our daily lives, we measure things or we count things. Now, why do we measure things or why do we count things? We measure things so that we can know the world around us better. Let us take an example. If you know the distance from your house to your school and from your house to, let us say, your grandparents' place, don't you now know the world around you better? Don't you have a better idea of how far your school is and how far your grandparents' place is? And you can actually decide whether you should go there by a bus or you can go there by walking, right? Also, measuring things or counting things makes our lives more comfortable. Let us say you go to a shopkeeper and you want to purchase some rice. Now, what are you going to tell the shopkeeper? How much rice do you need? Well, there has to be a certain measure. The shopkeeper must count the rice in some way. So the shopkeeper is not going to count the rice by numbers of 1, 2, or 3, and 4. He's rather going to count the quantity of rice. He's going to measure the quantity of rice in kilograms, and you're going to purchase rice in kilograms. So by using these different measures or by measuring things, we can understand our world better and our lives become more comfortable. Now, in science, the things that can be measured and then those things that can then be described using a number are called physical quantities. Anything that can be measured and then described using a number is called a physical quantity. Let me give you 3 examples. Now, length is a physical quantity, number 1. Number 2, time is another example of a physical quantity. Number 3, temperature is also an example of a physical quantity. Now, why do we call them physical quantities? Because we can measure them. Can you measure the length of something? Can you measure the length of, let's say, your room or the length of the table? Yes, you can, using a scale. Can you measure time? Yes, we can measure time using a clock or a watch. And can we measure temperature? We can measure temperature by using a thermometer, right? So these 3 things can be measured, but can these 3 things then be described by numbers? Can you actually tell the number? Can you find the number or the length of, let us say, the table in your room? Yes, you can. You can probably, for example, the table in my room is around 1.5 meters long. It is a very long table. And also, can you measure time? Well, can you tell the time between or the first period of your class to the second period of your class? Well, you can use your clock and you can say, well, it is around 45 minutes. So you can also describe time using a number. You can describe length using a number. And can we describe the temperature? Yes, we can measure it and we can describe the temperature using a number. For example, the temperature today probably is 22 degrees Celsius. Right, so anything that can be measured using a certain instrument and then can be described using a number is called a physical quantity. So I've given you 3 examples: length, time, and temperature. Now I would like you to also think about a few more physical quantities, things that can be measured and then described by a number. Now, very rapidly, I'm just going to tell you what length is. Length is the distance between any 2 places. Let's say this is a place or a point A. Let's call this point A. A point is nothing but a place, right? So let's say this is a point A and let's say this is point B. The distance between point A and point B is called the length of the substance. And what is time? Well, we'll understand what time is later in other classes, but let me just introduce you slightly a little bit to this. And time is the distance between 2 events. Now, what is time? Let me just come back to this. Is a distance between 2 events. Now, what are these? Listen to this carefully. Now, let me call this event 1. Let's have something known as event 1, and let's have something called as event number 2. Now, what is an event? This is a new word for you. Let me tell you what an event is. Event is called a ghatna in Hindi. Anything that happens is an event. Let me give you an example. For example, your birth was an event. The death of a person is an event. Well, the ringing of a bell is an event. The rising of the sun is an event. The setting of the sun is an event. The turning on of a bulb is an event. So anything that happens is called an event. Now the distance between two events is called time, and let me just tell you what that is. Now let us say the first event is the starting or the first bell of the school, right? So when you reach the school, there's this first bell that you hear, and then after certain period of time you hear the second bell, which marks the end of the first period. Now how far is the first bell, which is the first event, from the second bell, which is the second event? So what was the first event? The ringing of the first bell. What is the second event? The ringing of the second bell. And what is the distance between the first event and the second event? So you cannot measure this distance using your scale, because time cannot be measured using a scale. So what do we use? We use a clock, right? So we make use of a clock, and we find that the distance between the first event, which is the first bell of the school, and the second event, which is the second bell of the school, is around 45 minutes. Now, just in order to test you, let me ask you, what is the distance between your birth and today, which is today's date? Now, let us say let me give you an example. I was born in 1980. So this was the first event, right? So this is one event. And I'm talking about the second event, which is here. This is the second event. What is the distance between 1980 to 2021? Well, if you calculate it, you will find it is approximately 41 years. And this is again time. So we'll learn more about time in our later classes, but at the moment, just remember that time is the distance between two events. What is length? Distance between two places or 2 points. And time is the distance between two events. And events are also called ghatna in Hindi. Now, third thing or physical quantity that we did was temperature. And what is temperature? Temperature tells us how hot or how cold a thing is. So I hope you've understood what a physical quantity is, why do we need to measure things, and I hope you've understood the 3 examples of physical quantities. I'll see you in the next video.